Welcome everybody to this week's Winds of Spirit book study discussion. I'm Bridget Hopkins, and this week we're talking about Chapter 8, The Cardinal Wind of the North, the Spirit, also known as Boreas. But as I like to do in most of our circles, we're going to take a minute to ground all of our energy and bring us a little closer together today on this fine Thursday. So please take a moment. And if you're able, just close your eyes or soften your gaze. And really take a nice deep breath in, letting all of the wind move through you and oxygenate you. And on the next inhale, calling back all of the parts of yourself and releasing anything that is no longer in service. And I'd like for us to use the power of our imagination to go back to our sacred space, which is in the middle of a field, surrounded by large rock sculptures. If thinking of Stonehenge helps you think of something along those lines, but color it your way. And as we all begin to gather, imagine that you're walking underneath a stone archway. And continue to your right as we form our circle, inviting in everyone that is present on the call and with us in spirit and intention. And in the center of our circle is our sacred fire. And imagine that we all link hands. And we really allow the roots from the base of our feet to grow deep and wide into the soil and down, down, down into the earth. Making that beautiful connection with the earth energies. Just allow that energy to begin coming up through the base of your feet into your lower legs, into your upper legs, your pelvic floor, your low abdomen and low back, up all the way through your torso and heart center, into your shoulders, down your arms, around your fingers, and back up your arms, through the shoulders, your lower neck, moving up your neck and around your chin, the back of your head, helping to relieve any tension that may be held in your jaw, up around your eyes and checking to see if the space in between your eyebrows has softened. And allowing all of that energy to go out the top of your crown. And imagine, if you will, that you can slowly open the top of your crown for the level that's comfortable with you as we connect with source energy and the north wind, Boreas, as I begin to call him in with the wind whistle. And taking a moment to think over the last few days since our last gathering and call, and the time that you spent reading about the north wind. And I'd like you to think about if there's been any type of circumstance or situation that comes to mind where you could really attribute it to the north wind, Boreas. anything of spirit. And when you're ready, just go ahead and bring yourself fully back to this call. Thank you, everyone. So I always come prepared, but I like to open the call to each of the participants to see if anything's standing out for you right now after doing your reading with the North Wind Boreas. Do you have any questions or any experience that's come up for you? And just go ahead and take yourself off of mute when you're ready to speak.
I'll join in. I really enjoy the North chapter. It's perfect timing because, you know, it's touching on ultimately service and finding service. And, you know, it's just perfect because this week has really been where my head is at. Monday, I had a day off, and instead of, you know, getting into creative mode, which I like to do, and catch up on some things or create some content or something like that, all I did was sulk. And all I did was look at what I wasn't doing and what I should be doing. And I was in this headspace of like what I need to do, like what I need to offer, things I want to create. So I have my day job, my career, and then I also have all my healing work. And you know, ultimately it came around like to just thinking about it so much. And things have really changed since I closed my studio, and like I'm feeling that. Like I want to hold my events, and I can't because I don't have space, or I have to book space for other people, and I'm not in charge of that anymore. And so ultimately, I went this really is about the service, and that I have ways to make things happen if I want to make them happen. And to work with that wind and work with the energy of what and be in service instead of which is when I am the best, is when I'm doing something out of service instead of making a job out of it, instead of making the career out of it. It's always flowed when I come from a space of service. And so I just have to see what that's going to look like. But that's been exactly where my week's been, is just what the North Wind is talking about. So it's kind of cool. And in sync as always.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's funny because the first thing that I think about, which the North talks about a lot, is our shadow. And so what shadow is it that's present, that if like everything isn't a certain way, now it's harder to be in service.
Yeah.
Right.
So I sulked for a while.
I love that. Yeah.
And then I moved on.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, a good pity party works for all of us, right? Like, I love it. I definitely have mine. And I agree. But sometimes it takes that. I have such an affinity for my shadows. Like, I've really learned to love them. And one of the things that I like to do is have those pity parties. Like, let's have some tea. I mean, let's really have a pity party. You know, let's really sulk and see why this is happening. And my hunch is that you're getting ready to take a bigger step.
Yeah, I feel that. And actually, I had a journey, and I won't go into it here, but there was really an opening of opening it in the heart, and there was and energetically like a bird released. Then I wasn't sure if it was, I'm not going to go into it here. I'll take 15 minutes. Suffice to say, there's been multiple signs since that journey that speak to exactly that this things are stirring, things are opening, and I'm just going to stay alert for it and aware of it, as it comes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Thank you so much, Carrie. I really resonate with what you're sharing.
Oh, you're welcome.
Would anyone else like to share what's coming up for you in the north? If anything?
I would like to. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I have a weak internet connection, so just in case I black out, that's why.
Okay.
When you were talking about the shadow side, yes, this quote on page 72, it is better to face your demons consciously when they reveal themselves than to be ambushed by the ones you denied, which may lead to illness, loss, or tragedy. Mm-hmm. That quote really got me. I mean, so much of the North, I mean, the whole chapter's highlighted a lot. But that's something I can relate to very strongly because I've had problems with illness, loss, and tragedy. Because I was denying the shadow side of Deborah. And so I've been on a long journey to bring that forward. So definitely you don't want to deny it. You want to dig in and meet it. That's my experience. But also the North has been speaking to me quite a bit because I was in the West for so long. And I've got my wind whistle, and I did an inner landscape work and discovered a north wind. And then I pulled a card, blew my whistle, did all of that. It happened to be Carrie, which I think is Malaysia, right? But it's about, the question I had to do with my voice. And that's exactly what Carrie's about. You know, finding your voice, expressing yourself, and working in the North and working in community. And so I had an amazing time with very significant experiences this past weekend at what we call the Earth Dance. And I just love how this stuff works.
Yeah, I do too. And it gets to a point where I don't even want to say the word expect, but it is something like that. Like when you're so in tune, it's just always there. The presence is there, you know, and where I used to like be surprised by a sign, I'm like, oh yeah, of course. That makes perfect sense, you know? And it sounds like you're having that experience too, where it's like, yeah, this is exactly what I'm needing, and I'm listening, and I'm engaging, you know? Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yes, yes. And I still have that surprise too, even though I know, of course, you know, of course, the connection's there, you know, when I open myself, like what I did at the Earth Dance during a healing ceremony, and I wrote about this and shared it on the page. But there was it was actually a south wind blowing outside, even though the north wind was within me. But it was clearly a south wind blowing into this wonderful ceremony. And when the feathers were when I was, you know, smudged with feathers, I mean, it was just so incredible. My mouth was open, and there was a gust of this beautiful, fresh breath of air that I've never tasted before. I mean, it was something different. And I do a lot of breathing exercises and things, but it was so powerful. It went in through my nose, my mouth, I discovered was open. And it just flowed through my body. And I went, oh, yes. And then I went back and pulled the card and did all of that. And that's a question I have. I want to stay with Carrie for a while to work through. And before that, before I had my wind whistle, I was working with Maury, because that's the first one that popped up in the book when I flipped open. And it communicated something strong to me, as Carrie is. But I felt kind of funny, like, well, I just had this incredible experience. Do I pull a card? Because there was a south wind blowing. It was something different. And I didn't know whether to stick with Carrie or Mari or draw a card. So I did draw a card, because I somehow I got the message that this was something unique and I needed, and the card was Yaponcha, I think. It's the Hopi wind, which actually described what we danced the night before. And my morning talks in this community that morning had to do with the creation story of the Hopis and the Lakota and various things. So it seemed right, but how do you know whether to change winds or not?
Well, there's a couple answers for that. So the first one, you're feeling guided to pull a card, right? And there's no reason to distrust that. But it's really important that you do feel a sense of completion with whomever you're already working with. So that would be the first thing. Like, do you feel complete? Is there anything more that you need? If so, then please send that wind back with gratitude and then pull the card. Because what you can end up doing is having a lot of wind energy, and it's just, it's not, it's south and then east and then south and then north. And you'd be like, whoa, what's happening right now? So being mindful to make sure that you're done, release that wind and then work with the new wind. Sometimes if you're pulling the card and you're not actually actively calling in the wind, I've been able to change it a couple times in a week. But when I am calling in the wind, I am very particular about not calling in more and not working with more than that wind for however long it needs to be. Some winds are very quick for me, and others I've worked with for months. I'm still working with Oya. So that's the long and short answer. Trust yourself, enjoy it, and be mindful. You'll know if you have too much going on. You will not feel balanced. That's too much wind energy.
I actually asked the question, and it was like I was asking it of Carrie, because that's the wind I've been working with. And, is it okay for me to draw a card for this experience? And then I got that message. It was almost like asking permission, but I like this idea of, I would prefer there be a completion to it, but I don't think I'm done with her yet, or she with me.
Right. Whichever way it's going, right? Yeah. Great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Would anyone else like to share? So Deborah had shared the quote from page 72. I wanted to go back up a little bit to page 70. And this one passage, the north is a place of service. Your experience in this quadrant will either be pleasant or arduous, depending on your choices and the attitude you bring to each challenge. Remember, large challenges present greater opportunities for spiritual growth. And I thought that was really a really profound paragraph, because one, we've all had challenges, right? But how often do we look at our challenges as a greater opportunity? sometimes, you know, when I think about my past challenges, and there have been some pretty big ones, I mean, life altering, I have not looked at them as like, all right, this is my chance to strengthen my spiritual muscle. You know, I'm like, how do I run out of here? Can I dig a hole and put my head in it? Because I don't want to deal with this. And so I love the way that that's framed. And it's a really strong container if I'm willing to look at that and hold it in that light. And the other thing I was wondering about that is, have you found a gift in the experience from some of your greater challenges? Have you actually seen them as a gift? Or are there still some things, some choices that need to be made in order to get to that place? So some of your greater challenges, or just pick one, like the one that first comes to mind, you'll hear it within 5 seconds. That greatest challenge, do you see it as a gift? And if not, are there still some choices that need to be made around it so that it can be? And feel free to pop on if anything comes to mind and you'd like to share.
I don't want to hog all the time, but I do have one if no one else wants to share. Sure. And this is an old one. I was married at 18 and divorced at 19. And this man was a very destructive, abusive person. So I didn't see it until after I married him. In fact, I did see it the first day I walked into their apartment. But so I lived in fear of him because he was a rather violent kind of person, and I didn't trust him at all. So I lived in fear for several years. And then eventually something changed where I started looking at, well, what did I learn from this experience? And I learned how to take care of myself, was one of the big messages. And so I started blessing the experience, knowing that it came into my life for a reason. And it really turned me around and made me aware of so many things. So yes, I do. It takes me a while, but with each major issue that comes up, you know, I want to hide from it and run from it at first or not accept it. And I had a recent one that I've been working through this past year, but it takes me time, a lot of time, to eventually see it as a blessing, to see it as a gift. And I'm grateful for that knowledge that we can do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it strengthens us. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Would anyone else like to hop on? And there's no pressure. If nothing comes to mind or you're not comfortable, I can keep going. I just like to give you guys a chance to chime in. So I'll wait one more, give you 30 seconds.
I'll say one of my biggest challenges is, actually I'm still in it, but I'm coming out on the other side of it, is the kids. Like, my kids are in that transition of, you know, well, they're beyond the transition. I mean, I have one of my kids is living in Australia, but they've moved on to start their own lives. And that showed me where I was very controlling, which I'm always like pro independence. And when it comes to my own kids being independent, I'm like, wait a minute. This wasn't like, this happened too quick. This isn't what I wanted. So, but I'm still in it. And I think it's because you look at lost time and how time goes by fast. And so I guess that's the gift in it, is it gives you that awareness of like, that time is fleeting. And yeah, so that is I'm still in that, so I haven't fully appreciated the gift, but I am aware of the gift. I just haven't fully opened it.
Picking off the tape.
There's yeah, there's resistance around it, but whether I want to or not, the gift is there, and it's important. But yes, that's what came to mind for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, one big one that I've been working through for, goodness, the last 4 years. We had a rescue dog, and her name is Solstice, and she came into our lives right at the same time that I started doing my moon work. So that's not a coincidence. And, you know, long story short, another dog came into our lives, and I knew when he found me, the circumstances, you know, were just too incredible to ignore. And I knew that he was coming for my husband. Like, he was here to help my husband, because I had that same recognition when I saw Solstice. Like, I knew that I could not walk away from her, because there was something very powerful drawing the two of us together. Well, this new dog that found us created a lot of conflict in the household, because he is smaller and highly active, and he created a lot of stress for Solstice. And I couldn't see it. I just could not see the stress. And it broke my heart when we realized that we were going to have to surrender her and give her back to the agency that we adopted her from, because it wasn't in her best interest to live with us any longer. So, you know, talk about shadows. I mean, so many things in the shadow came up around that, and so many personal, it just felt like such a failure. Like, I don't know how to take care of an animal. And you know, we surrendered her, and for 3 years, you couldn't even show me a picture of her or say her name, because I was literally heartbroken. And just recently, like, a whole series of events came that were here to help me. So think of the north wind really blew in and was like, come on, girl, it's time to look at this from a whole new perspective. Let's elevate you a little bit. You're on the ground floor. Let's take you up to the treetops so that you can get a bird's eye view of this situation. And the minute that my level of perception changed, I could really see how she was never meant to be with me for life. She was my greatest teacher of non-attachment living and love, and how to do that. And before her, I was like a grasshopper. If I clung onto you, you couldn't pull my legs off of you, you know? But she was my teacher. She really taught me how to love unconditionally and non-attached. It was a very, very hard lesson to learn and super painful, but I can talk about her now and not cry. And I can see dogs that look like her and I don't cry. And I have so much gratitude. And so, you know, the whole lesson has come full circle, and I can see the gifts, and I'm really thankful for that gift. And, you know, you just never know who your teacher is going to be or what the lesson is going to look like. And I agree with all of you that have shared that, you know, I just read something today that said, you know, time heals all wounds. Like, that old adage is actually, it's misleading, because it isn't time that's healing the wound, it's healing that's healing the wound. And sometimes that can happen instantaneously, right? Like, we are all experiencing great shifts and changes with the wind work, and it's in no time at all. So I hesitate to say, well, time heals, but it's healing that heals. And it's the willingness to be open. You know, Renee always says, be willing to be willing, or the willingness to be willing. And I think that's a really big gift from the North. Like, it's ready to work with us if we're willing. So this is, this is a good one. So on page 70, our friends, those who help us. Many life lessons are gleaned from adversaries. So it is wise to consider the challenging energies of the wind gods and goddesses as opportunities to reconsider how you respond to threats. And I just, you know, there's a show on Netflix that I've recently been tuned into called The Good Witch. I don't know if any of you have ever seen it. It's such a wholesome, sweet show. And there's a character on there whose name is Abigail. And she is like the nemesis to everybody in the town. So whenever Abigail gets involved, you just know that something's not going to work quite right. But there's always a reason to her madness. And so she is what I would call a catalyst for change. So at first it seems like, oh, she's undermining, or oh, she's creating conflict or chaos, when really what she's doing is help to get that person back on track in their lives. And so that's what came to mind when I read that passage. Our friends, those who help us. Many life lessons are gleaned from adversaries. So it is wise to consider the challenging energies of the wind gods and goddesses as opportunities to reconsider how you respond to threats. I think of it as the like the wind on the roots. In order for a tree to be really healthy and to continue growing well and staying in the environment for a long, long time, the roots drive deep. And what drives them deep are the winds. So we can look at, heavy winds as being punishing or difficult, but there's a purpose. And it's the same thing with some of these people who come into our lives that we feel are threatening or not really good for us, or adversaries. But what are they helping us to root in? Where, when, how, why, what, right? So does that bring anything up for anyone on the call? Okay. On page 71, while the energy of the north wind may appear passive on the surface, it is active below. The north is an essential gateway to a deeper spiritual realm residing within you, wherein lie powerful, fertile energies. So I want to take this back to an earlier passage, which was talking about the shadow, and also how we just got out of the west wind. The west and the north can work together in our bodies to show us places we aren't yet in touch with cognitively or spiritually that are showing up in our physical being. And what I mean by that is you may notice the feeling of a trigger in your body before you know why you're triggered. And so thinking about bringing the west and the north together at times, especially when we're working with shadow, to help us become more aware of where these energies are living within us that are unresolved. The body can really become a great messenger system. So sometimes we're just feeling weird when we're around someone and we have no idea what's going on because it hasn't registered up here yet because it's hidden, it's subconscious. So I'll read the first part of the passage again. While the energy of the north wind may appear passive on the surface, it is active below. The north is an essential gateway to a deeper spiritual realm residing within you, wherein lie powerful, fertile energies. Have you had this experience? Are you aware of that within yourself?
I was going to speak a little bit on the first question, but I couldn't answer you. And then you jumped to the next passage. But the first, the comment about our friends or the adversaries that, and it's, I've really a lot from adversaries. I've learned a lot about where I give too much, where I give too little. And you can't control necessarily how other people think or treat you, but some of it really highlights when something is an adversity or an adversarial, person or whatever that comes along in your life, it's pivotal. It's been pivotal when you look back on it. And then that second, what was the last one you were just talking about, is the deeper, I was kind of thinking that connected, because a deeper sense of your spirit or awakening, if you are faced with seeing, for me, I'll speak for me, where I have given or not given, or why I hold back certain things, that also opens up to deeper wisdom or deeper understanding, basically, of yourself. And that's just what I was kind of thinking about. I won't say any specific at the moment. It's more general, not to go into as far as a situation, but there definitely are situations, and situations like that are pivotal and help to kind of progress you along your path, to see like who you really are, good, bad, and the ugly.
Absolutely. Yeah, the multifacets, right? If we want to claim wholeness, how are we whole if there are still aspects of ourselves that we deny? It doesn't work that way, right? So we are all things, even if we like it or not. And I think that depth, for me, that passage on page 71, how the energies of the North may appear passive on the surface and they're active below. I mean, I spent 3 years doing heavy shadow work. And I mean, I'm still doing it. I don't know that it ever ends. But I mean, some of the things that I've unearthed, I'm like, wow. Okay, I can see why I was really uncomfortable in the skin I'm in, because I don't want to be that. But once I really saw it for what it was and the gifts that it was lending, it's like, okay, now we have something to work with instead of, avoidance and denial. Now comes the gifts and the opportunities. Right. And so I think that that's one of the most beautiful things about really working with the North and diving in deep, is that you're given the opportunity for more gifts and greater gleam, if you will, like more sparkle in your life. It doesn't always have to be hard and murky. Yeah. So thank you, Carrie.
No problem. One thing I had highlighted was on page 71, actually, where it's like, if you ever lose your spiritual bearings, that was a good slip. If you ever lose your spiritual being or your guides, right? If you ever lose your spiritual bearings, pause and reflect on the energies of the winds. And then this part here below it, listen carefully to your inner compass as your intuition uses it to whisper words of long forgotten wisdom. And I highlighted that long forgotten wisdom because, I mean, you could think of that, long forgotten wisdom through the ages of like, from teachers, but the long forgotten wisdom from ourselves, because we often have to see a lesson a few different times in a few different ways until we finally understand it and get under it. And that's just making me think about that. What's happening under the surface, things need to erupt a few times, and then it's a deeper meaning each time. But that long wisdom from all sources that we can forget to tap into.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. There was something else that came up while I was listening to, but I'm having a hard time accessing it right Well, that's what it was, is that I think that one of the, like earlier, Deborah was asking about the winds and how, how best to work with them. And, I always love to put it back to the person, because the truth is what works for me may not work for anyone else ever. And I think that that's the era that we're coming into now in our growth and development, is like really turning back to the self, because you have such innate, unique gifts that I may never have, but I come walking with my own medicine, right? And so I love that she put that in the book as a reminder that it is our responsibility to listen. Listen, 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 because that's when we can really hear, but it's not with our ears. It's just like when we can see, but it's not with our eyes. You are working with different energies in a different realm, and it isn't using the traditional five senses. And it's really important. We all deserve that, I think. So the age of the guru, I think, is falling away.
Can I share something about this topic?
Yeah.
This individual path, this fact that we have individual gifts that interact with other people's gifts. It's like a puzzle, and we fit our pieces together. Sometimes we clash, and sometimes it works, and even when we clash, it works, as we're learning today. I have been walking the medicine wheel for about a dozen years now. And I even did a class that my mentor and I created called the Language of the Medicine Wheel. And in it, I learned about not only each of the directions. We happen to have 8 directions that we follow in our community, but not only does each direction have its own gifts and meanings and stories and whatever, but then the interaction between the East and the South, or the South and the West and the North. Also crosswise, I've learned that if I am feeling really vulnerable in the South, that I need to look for some energy from the North to help balance me out. So I've been working with that with Carrie recently. So this medicine wheel, I have been in the West for a couple of years now, since my last vision quest. And that's where the shadow work has been coming up, but very strongly in the last 6 to 8 months. And the other was like preparation for it. And now the North is showing up. It's like, okay, I'm ready to move and take the lessons of the West and move on in and look for that light in the North. And it all fits, I don't know, I would not have been ready to do this deep deep work in the North without having done the work in the West. It just, one feeds the other. And then I go back, if something comes up. But I love how that works.
Mm-hmm. And I like how you use the word one feeds the other. Mm-hmm. That's the key, right? Is that it's reciprocal, it's giving and it's receiving and it's moving, and it isn't just one way, And so I think if we get stuck in like some type of dogma, or it has to be this way, it's not nurturing anymore, right? It's not food. It's not
right.
Yeah. So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, and it's funny that you bring up the medicine wheel. That was going to be something, if we have time, I was going to share at the end, since I'm in the North and working with the North and the medicine wheel recently. It was very interesting. So on page 72, this, and I meant to say this as a disclaimer before we even started the call, so I'm going to do it at the end of the call. trigger warning. This, you know, just talking about the North in general can be triggering because it is about, you know, balancing the light and the dark. So on page 72, remember that self-realization is about developing clarity, focus, and discovery. Thus, your visit to the land of the north wind need not be a mission of darkness, sorrow, and suffering. It can be a time to pause and reflect before starting something new, to take a silent retreat or even an afternoon nap. And what this brought up when I read that is that there are a lot of people making tons of money off of people's suffering. And recently I even read something on Instagram that they have bots that are empathy bots. So these, you know, web pages that have a lot of followers, the content is all created electronically. It isn't even a person doing it. And that just tells me how much suffering is taking place and how people are benefiting from that. But this personal development work does not always have to be about pain. And I think that that's one of the gifts of the wind, is that it you know, it's a fluid motion. It goes back to what Deborah and I were just saying. It's food. It's taking you from this energy into this one and then moving and going so that you're not stagnating. I think sometimes we can get stuck in our pain because it becomes so familiar. We almost over-identify with it. You know, my mother had addiction. I had trauma. I identified with both of those for a very, very long time because they helped me not to take action. How could I when I had been victimized so badly? That was my story. But I wasn't aware at that time that I was making a choice to stay committed to the story as opposed to taking action to creating a new one. And I think that that's, you know, when I read page 72, that paragraph, you know, remember that self-realization is about developing clarity, focus, and discovery. It's so important. That reminder is so key to doing this work. It's, you know, it's experiential, but it's also to help us get a better sense of perception, a new vantage point. I also wrote here that the skill to develop in the North is self-validation and self-honoring. To note and appreciate all of your attributes, good and bad, strong and weak, however you quantify the duality. Because again, going back to wholeness, we are both sides. We are not a singularity. I think if we were a singularity, we wouldn't probably even be in the human form anymore because we would be so enlightened. We would just poof, vanish. So if my butt's sitting in the chair, I have duality going on. Get my drift? So, you know, I know that it's usually, an opposition, good, bad, strong, weak, higher, lower, however you want to quantify it. To me, that's not as important as remembering to give yourself some credit, to acknowledge the work that you've already done and that you're committed to doing more. We need to give ourselves credit, and no one else is going to be our cheerleader. And that's really, really important to remember. Sometimes we want it to come from the outside, but it is our job to self-validate. And so that was the other part that came up when I read that, and I wanted to share that with you guys. Would anyone else like to share? I get a little preachy sometimes and my cheeks get all red. It's pretty funny. Like, oh, that's got to be a shadow of some sort.
I'm back. I had to run. I've been listening. I had to get ready to go to the gym right after this. But yeah, first of all, the bots, that's horrifying. And but it just gives you insight too into the, what you see online is a lot of it's illusionary. So, but yeah, now I just lost my train of thought. You said Oh my gosh, I just lost it. What was your question?
Well, I didn't really ask a question as much as I was just sharing about how, you know, self-realization is
Ah,
about developing.
yes. Self-validation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, instead of self-flagellation, yes. Self-validation, yes. And that is actually like, it's what I had to like do on Monday to like really just like sort of like pick myself up off the bootstraps and say, you'll figure this out, but you're not going to figure it out right now if you're sulking. So like looking at the good things and get the momentum, and then that just brings in the wind, like to just like uplift you again, and you and let it take you. So I and it did. So but that validation is huge because and if you are comparing yourself or looking at you know what other people might be accomplishing, it's all relative um, to yourself on your own journey. But yes, acknowledgement and validation is huge. If you can't see, you know, sometimes what your own worth is, you know, it's a slippery slope to go down further. But it's also, especially if people are doing healing work, to be able to heal that in yourself so you can heal someone else. And, you know, like that's a big part of why I'm been taking a big break to heal some things within myself before I move on to the next thing. And that is stirring. There's a lot stirring in me now because I've taken the time to just take a break.
Yeah. Yeah, and going back to that earlier part about the adversaries, right? Something that came to mind while I was listening to you, Carrie, is, you know, over the last 3 days, this is no joke, and this is how the wind works, and I always love it. Last 3 days, I have literally had 3 different trucks pull up behind me, lay on the horn, either scream at me or flip me off. It's all been a different flavor of the same energy, okay? Like super intense, aggressive energy. And there's nothing that I could have done differently because the cars ahead of me stopped and I couldn't get around. So like we were all stuck. And at first I was like, just send them love. Just keep sending these people love because I want to be a person that can, you know, be around this type of uncontrollable energy and have my bearings. Like I want to stay rooted. But after about 4 minutes of it, I'm like, oh, like ready to just, and then I eventually blow. And I'm like, this is really interesting because they're here to show me these 3 different people that I will never see again in my life came right behind me to show me, hey girl, you're still not where you want to be. What is it going to take to get you there? You know, and really what it would have taken was like, hey, buddy, I don't know what the problem is. Like, go take care of yourself right now. You know, instead of being like, oh, I'm the nice girl. I didn't feel nice. That wasn't real. That wasn't true. I wanted to flip them right back, you know, but so it's funny how, you know, really when I step away from it and look at it, there were other actions that I could have taken right in the beginning and recognize that this person is here to help me really own something in myself that I'm still not doing. And you can be a nice person and not take other people's crap. They're both possible, you know? So I thought that was funny examples.
You need a bumper sticker so they can see it when they pull up behind you. I'm a nice girl, but I'm not taking any of your crap.
Right. Don't trust the smile. Exactly. So just a funny little example of how this works. You know, they were great opportunities. So a couple things. I think is it 6 o'clock? I think we're right on. Is it 6?
Just about 4 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So a couple things. One, I would like to ask everyone that's on the call and also listening in later, if you haven't done so, if you would be willing to leave a book review for Renee. It helps her to keep being seen and visible on Amazon. It's a really simple way to give back for this experience, because this entire thing has been a gift. And so, you know, she and I would both appreciate it, but I'm giving a little plug for her because it's nice. As an author, I've appreciated every ounce of feedback that I've gotten for my book. So the other thing is that next week we're going to start part 3. So that is from pages 77 through 84. Okay. And I just wanted to take a moment. So on page 73, I'm going to share this and then we'll go back to our circle and close out so that we can release Boreas. But on page 73, at times life can feel like we are walking through a harsh winter storm without a scarf, causing us to retreat, causing us to the winds with causing us to reach to the winds with bitterness and rage. During these chilling experiences, we learn to exercise patience and practice tolerating the wind. As a wise teacher, the North sometimes employs tough love in order to align us with our destiny or magnetic north. So I just want you to think back over the last few chapters that we've all worked with together. And we talked about beliefs, emotions, and our physical being, and now we're working with spiritual self. And also the different types of wind intensities. We went through all of that. How can these become an ally for you during times of great challenges? That's just a question I want to leave everybody with. Like, I'm going to be thinking about what ally could I have utilized during those very intense, aggressive drivers? Still figuring it out. I don't have the answer, but well, I would like to thank everyone for attending the call today, and we will post the link a little bit later in the evening. And let's just take a moment to go back to our sacred circle. So just imagine that we're walking through the stone archway. If you left the circle, come back through the stone archway. If you're still present in the circle, let's just take a moment to look at one another one last time. Looking at the beauty of the fire. I would just like to offer and extend my gratitude to everyone that was present today on our call, as well as those who will be listening in later. Thanking the wind Boreas for these wonderful lessons and contemplations. Also thanking our shadows, for they can be one of our greatest teachers. And thanking Boreas for being here today, and we send him back to the north. Thank you, everyone. I hope that you have a wonderful weekend, and we will be tuning in next Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to go over part 3.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Carrie. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.